Good morning, everyone. I'd like to start by thanking Vicki and Guy for organizing this workshop. I'm excited to participate and to share some of the preliminary results from the study of the ceramic finds from the most recent excavations at the site of Ancient Methone. I will begin my presentation today with a short overview of the site and the previous excavations before moving into a more detailed presentation of the ceramic material from the third filling phase of the feature that we call Hypogeion 2, a rock cut shaft that was used for successive episodes of trash discard from the 6th to the 4th centuries BCE. Finally, I'll conclude by placing this material within its wider North Aegean context and discussing some of the longer-term trends identifiable in the successive fills of Hypogeion 2. All right. No? Okay. The site of Ancient Methone lies on the Thermaic Gulf, just southwest of Thessaloniki. Still not. Oh, there we go. Lying at the mouths of two of the longest rivers in Greece, the Axios and the Aliakmon, Methone was ideally located to facilitate the trade of imported materials for local commodities like timber and salt, for examples. The archaeological site straddles two low hills, originally forming a promontory jutting out into the Thermaic Gulf. The east hill originally sheltered harbors on both the north and south sides, allowing safe haven to sailors regardless of which way the winds were blowing. Today, however, much of the east hill has been lost through erosion, as you can see by this dramatic erosion scarp here with the red line in this elevation model of the site. The Greek colony of Methone was founded by Eretrians who had been expelled from Corcyra in 733, 732 on the site of an indigenous settlement. The relationship between the indigenous population and the newly arrived Eretrians is not clear from the archaeological evidence, but Greek material culture quickly took hold at the site and locally produced Eretrian style pottery, like the example you see here, predominates by the early 7th century. During the 7th and 6th, the West Hill of Methone was covered in workshops specializing in the production of pottery, metal jewelry and pins, and ivory and bone working. As a gatekeeper between the Thermaic Gulf and the wider Aegean, Methone attracted increased attention from the Kingdom of Macedonia, particularly after the foundation of Pella as a port capital under Archelaus I. Further evidence for a concerted strategy to gain control over the Thermaic Gulf can be seen in Archelaus's capture and relocation of the population of Pydna in 410-409 after a brief revolt. Methone benefited from joining the Delian League in 434, managing to escape Archelaus's campaigning and retained its independence until the reign of Philip II. Philip appears to have decided to end Methonian independence once and for all after they served as a base for the Athenian general Mantius, 3,000 Athenian hoplites, and the Athenian navy, when the Athenians supported the short-lived usurper king Argaeus in 359. In 355, 354, Philip finally besieged the city, and despite holding out for some time, Methone eventually fell, and its population was dispersed, being allowed to leave with a single garment each. A permanent Macedonian garrison established nearby would ensure that the population did not return. And from what we can observe from the site, this strategy was more or less successful. That is, we don't really see much post-Philippic activity, the exception being in the harbor area. And it's likely because the harbor was so fortuitously located that the inhabitants of the new Macedonian garrison actually continued to use the harbor, even though the site was in some way forbidden. So, I forgot my Dramatic kidnap. So it's during this battle that Philip famously lost his eye due to a sharpshooting Methonian archer, as noted by Diodorus, you can see here, and others. Excavations at the site of Ancient Methone were conducted from 2003 to 2013 by the Effort of Antiquities of Pieria under the direction of Manthos Besius, Athena Athanasiadou, and Konstantinos Noulos. These excavations revealed important evidence for both the early colonial settlement and the final destruction of the site by Philip II. Excavations in the area of the so-called Agora preserved well-preserved floor deposits datable to the mid-4th century and likely associated with the final abandonment of the site. On the West Hill, a series of syringes or defensive tunnels, likely associated with the line of the ancient city wall, produced abundant sling bullets showing that they were in use during the final siege. An important overview of my Greek colleagues' findings related to the siege can be found in the destruction of Greek cities in the Ancient World volume, edited by Sylvian Fichard and Edward Harris. And more detailed studies of the ceramics from the area of the Agora are forthcoming in an edited volume of studies on the material from the 2003 to 2013 excavations to be published by the Coates Institute of Archaeology Press, hopefully in the next year or so. From 2014 to 2017, a collaborative project between the American School of Classical Studies at Athens and the Effort of Antiquities of Pieria excavated additional trenches along the northern and southern limits of the West Hill, and you can see those here in gray. Their excavation revealed a Bronze Age cemetery and settlement remains beginning in the local sub-protogeometric phase. The best preserved levels of settlement span the 7th and the 6th and are largely the remains of workshops. Despite the well-attested destruction deposits in the Agora and nearby syringes, however, our excavations revealed almost no adjacent classical strata other than stray sherds in topsoil. The lone exception was the rock-cut shaft initially designated as Pit 46 in the field and now called Hypogeon 2. This rock cut feature was excavated to a depth of 9.4 meters, at which point the collapse of the lower walls made it too dangerous to proceed excavating the entire thing. But a small sounding and cores sunk down to about 12.15 meters, failed to reach any discernible bottom to it. So we really don't know how deep this went. But it was definitely quite deep. So study of the finds from within Hypogeon 2 demonstrate it was filled in at least 3 discrete phases. The first, dated to the later part of the 6th century, may be associated with the initial collapse of the lower walls. This phase contains a number of fine attic imports, in addition to crucibles and other workshop debris, likely indicating material from the localized area of this shaft, so where those workshops are located. And this can tentatively be associated with a mid-6th century destruction horizon identified in those same workshops by our Greek colleagues in their earlier excavations. The remainder of the shaft continued to be open to the elements until the late 5th century, when abundant pottery and roof tiles were dumped down the shaft. So this is filling phase 2. And this contains a number of near complete vessel profiles joining several meters of the fill, including this nice skyphos by the Millen painter that helps to establish a filling date in the late 5th century. Where the material for this later fill came from is an open question, given the lack of classical finds, basically anywhere on the West Hill other than in the syringes. So finally, we come to the third filling phase and the one that I'm going to discuss today. This filling phase likely consisted of a depression that formed when the first two phases compacted. It was less defined than the first two phases in that it is more mixed with phase two. There's not a clear contact between the two phases. And what really distinguishes it is the presence of key diagnostic features of the 4th century, lead sling bullets, presumably associated with the final siege activity, and coins of Amintas III. And so on account of this, and the lack of later occupation of the site, the third filling phase can be given a pretty secure terminus antiquem of 355, 354. All right, so in total, 15,913 sherds have been counted from passes assigned to the third filling phase. 52% represents various fineware categories, including decorated, undecorated, and gray wares. 26% is storage, represented mainly by amphora fragments, as well as a few pithos fragments, but there's not really many in filling phase 3. And 20% cookwares. The remaining 2% are handmade sherds that are almost certainly all residual, and most of which are extremely worn. Among the decorated fine wares, local North Aegean wares predominate, making up 74% of the assemblage. The most popular imported decorated fineware is Attic, 21%, with all of the caveats already highlighted in earlier discussion of Attic or Atticizing. These can be followed by 3% Corinthian, 2% East Greek, and 1% other. Again, the other is largely residual things, including pieces from Laconia, for instance, that are obviously archaic. Among the Thermaic wares, the most popular fineware shapes are various forms of lecanides or lacanes. These can take a variety of forms, but they're typically linear decorated. Some have a ledged rim for fitting a lid. Rarely the rim is rilled, like the example seen on the upper left, a feature that's also documented in contemporary deposits from Thermi. Among the local monochrome decorated wares, one-handlers are the most common, but small bowls and bowlsels of local production have also been identified. And you can see some examples here. Many of these pieces show evidence for dipping rather than application of paint with a brush, which can be one of the telling ways to distinguish them. A singular find from the third filling phase is the North Aegean bell crater, decorated with a single wavy band in the handle zone. I so far have no parallel for this, so if anybody knows of a good comparandum, please let me know in the discussion. I would very much appreciate it. The largest quantity of Attic or Atticizing pieces are black glazed vessels, of which type A skiffoi predominate. Other common Attic imports include small bowls, bowlsels, and one-handlers. Fish plates and cantharoi are present, but very rare. Closed shapes are also infrequent, but include, among the most popular shape, ascoi of the shallow type, and lacathoi. Only 12% of the Attic material features figured decoration, and perhaps somewhat surprisingly, there's an equal number of red figured and black figured sherds in this deposit, which really suggests that the red figure vases were not being imported in particularly large numbers at all, given that all those black figure sherds are residual. There probably is some problem here due to fragmentation, since a lot of those black figure fragments come from early Attic cups, which tend to be very diagnostic. even in very small sherds, but obviously break into a lot of little tiny pieces. The most common red figured shape is the ascos, including the example seen here with probable cat or feline and a goose or swan. And this finds a nice parallel in Göttingen, although ours looks stylistically slightly later than this piece. Something the relatively conical profile, which you can see here, also suggests. The ascos is followed in popularity by the bell crater and then the skyphos. Bell crater fragments are mostly rims, bases, and undecorated fragments of the lower body. Of the few pieces preserving the figured decoration, however, the most common motif are mantled youths, like the pieces that you see here. And this motif is popular at other Northern Greek sites, including at Argylos, fairly nearby. From the scyphoid fragments, a female head wearing a sakos in profile is typical also of the 4th century in Northern Greece. Similar scyphoi are produced in Olynthos, although this piece, at least to my eye, appears to be Attic. Red figure shape that is relatively common elsewhere, but only a single fragment is preserved in Hypogeon 2 is the Lakanis lid. And this piece has the typical imagery consisting of at least one female figure and a flying eros. Rare examples of red figure from local workshops may also be present. Although most of these seem to be standard Attic fabrics, the ascos that you see here makes use of miltos to enhance the red figure decoration. This may derive from a Chalcidicean workshop, although it equally could be Attic, as miltos was being applied to Attic wares during the same period. This does seem to lack gold mica that's typical of Chalcidicean wares, so the jury's a little out on it. Turning away from the decorated fine wares, we find a heavy reliance on local pottery sources. Undecorated jugs in fine to medium fabrics are present, including examples with string-wrapped necks. These also find good parallels at Olynthus and Thermi. Rarer is a grayware hydria with stroke-burnished exterior, a well-known Macedonian type attested also at Thermi and Vergina. This characteristic surface finish also appears on some cookware lids and lopades, and this stroke burnishing has very deep roots in Macedonia, going back to the early Iron Age, if not earlier, and it attests to a vibrant and resilient local potting community. Two types of larger lacane are present, one which you can see here with stamped decoration on the exterior of a wide flat rim, and another type with added red decoration on a medium coarse fabric. Both types of lacanes find good parallels from Pieria and Heraklion, just to the south, near modern Platamonas. And lacanes from that site have roller decorated rims, and a roller was actually found in workshop debris there. Among the cooking ware, the usual range of lids, lopades, and kitra predominate. Of local importance is the flangeless lopas, which has already been discussed and which is widely documented as being particularly popular in the Thermaic Gulf region. Courseware vessels, both transport and storage, as well as heavy-duty kitchen mortaria have also been documented. Among the mortaria, a locally produced type, rich in gold mica with a raised lip that you see here, spool handles, and a flaring spout is typical. As already mentioned, there are a few pithoi fragments, but we do have abundant amphora fragments from phase 3, including some mendable examples. These are dominated by amphoras of Mendian type, like the one seen here. A more exciting amphora find, perhaps, is what appears to be a Punic amphora type of the late 5th or early 4th century, likely imported from Tunisia. The material from Hypogeon 2, filling phase 3, finds its closest parallels in the sites ringing the Thermaic Gulf. I've already mentioned strong links to the site of Pieria and Heraklion just to the south, of Methone and Thermi to the north. To these, we can add Mende, lying opposite on the west coast of Halkidiki Key. Weaker links are documented at Olynthus and Argylos, who seem to have received a similar array of Attic red-figured wares, but to have made slightly different overall consumption choices. Notable at Methone is the large number of Ascos fragments in this deposit. One of the most notable long-term trends in the material from pit 46 is the consistent nature of Attic imports across the 6th, 5th, and 4th centuries. In the 6th, Attic makes up 23% of all decorated fine wares. In the 5th, 25%, and in the 4th, it's only slightly lower at 21%. This goes to underscore the enduring nature of Athenian interest in the site and its importance as a provider of ship timber for the Athenian fleet. A focus on Attic alone, however, neglects the much larger corpus of local production taking place in the North Aegean and the Thermaic Gulf in particular. Over the long term, it is particularly evident how local workshops responded to particular consumer demands for imported products. A good case study are the mortaria from the site. As early as the 7th, Methone imported domestic mortaria from Cyprus, followed in the 6th and 5th by mold-made mortaria from Corinth. By the time of the 3rd filling phase, however, in the first half of the 4th century, mortaria production was almost entirely local. By focusing publications on Attic wares, we can lose sight of these regional developments. Likewise, among the undecorated and cookwares, the presence of stroke-burnished vessels represents the resilience of local potting communities and consumer demand for a particular local style of finish. The call for papers prompted us to depart from an Athena-centric point of view and to highlight regional dynamics in the circulation and consumption of pottery in the 4th century BC world. I hope that the present contribution highlights the strength of local Thermaic potting communities in the 4th century and stimulates further interest in the sourcing and circulation of their wares. Thank you, and thank you to all my fellow colleagues who have helped with this research along the way.